Just resonated with my banjo in the corner there. Okay, so I just finished watching, was it Electric Life of Lewis Wayne, and I like this guy, and it stimulated a couple of things. While I'm thinking about it, because Wayne suffered from mental illness, and if you look at the Wikipedia article, there's an argument as to what kind of mental illness he suffered from. Some say schizophrenia, some say Asperger's or autism spectrum disorder, APD. It's not a disorder. Autism is not a disorder. Let's be clear about that. It's, if harnessed correctly, it's a superpower. Hyper fixation, detail. Just like OCD is helpful. And frankly, without his artwork, Wayne would have probably been dead, with the nervous breakdowns that he had. Or at least that's portrayed in the movie. So let's go to the Wikipedia. Again, Wikipedia is only a good starting point. It's not the definitive word on anything, because it's peer-reviewed, right? And anyone can be an editor on Wikipedia. Don't trust it, right? It shifts the meanings, and the definitions shift with the culture. If you go to the Internet Archive, you can find articles, the same articles that have been revised over and over and over again, and it becomes this game of telephone between, power struggles and so on and so forth. And it's very important when you're assessing things from history to not impose current day cultural values upon the past. You have to view them through the lens, here like that. Of the day. You have to look at things from the judgments and the morals and the ethics of the day and what was going on. You can't just keep moving the goalposts of the analysis in order to make it what you want. That becomes like what I think it's like confirmation bias or not cognitive dissonance. Electrical Life of Lewis Wayne. So this dramatization is very good. I see it as a passion project. I did enjoy it, and I recognize the images right away, but it didn't necessarily recognize who actually made them, because it's very easy with the internet now to steal art and to claim it as your own, just by Photoshop, and you erase the name and then you texturize in your own or whatever it is. And so it's very important as an artist to have originals. So by the metadata on the photographs, documentation when you're taking pictures of say the paintings or whatnot, and that it's important for me as an artist to know exactly where my paintings are and what kind of condition they're in while I'm still alive. Because without having children at this very moment in time, they're very important to me, and they are like my children. So I want to know how they are, and I want to know that they're being enjoyed and they're being shown, because it's you put a lot of effort into artwork, especially oil paintings or textile art. Let's be honest about textiles, okay? So if you want to, let's be more concise and clear. Canvas is textile, right? I wouldn't have. There's no without clothing or without any quilting or rugs, even furniture, anything woven, right? Because those are representations of a cultural fabric, so to speak, something that binds us all. The essence and the industry that it takes to create something like that, industrious nature, and okay, so obviously textile art is highly feminine, and it's actually on the lowest rung, in quotations there, as far as the respect that's given to it. you know, because again, it's usually just done by women, and with the industrial nature now of fashion, and you know, it's been elevated, of course, to high art in some respects. Not really my thing, you know. I do like sewing. I'll do it as a pragmatism, and as a for a utilitarian nature, and obviously when I want to wear something, you know, gotta clothe myself somehow. If given the opportunity, since I'm gonna go along on this, you know, talking about and correlating it to Wayne, because of his family, right? Where is it here? From the Bethlehem Museum of the Mines. Lewis was born 5th August 1860. His father was a traveler for a textile firm. His mother, of French immigrant descent, designed church embroideries and carpets. So I posted early on my Instagram the embroidery patch from de Havilland. You know, it's a very rare item as far as I can tell. I don't know anyone else that has that, and I got that from you know, my grandfather, and that my mother's side of the family is where that came from. Same with, like, as I've displayed before, like the T-shirt with the embossing and like the silk screen on it, and then the Curtis Museum T-shirt that I have is from like basically from the 1970s. So here we are. Okay, actually I'm gonna raise this up. I don't like looking at my eyes like that. It feels weird. Okay. Now, what tears the fabric of society apart when propaganda is concerned? And what I'm gonna interlude into this is manufactured consent and the shock doctrine. So, manufactured consent is Noam Chomsky, and it's one of his pivotal works. And he did that in cooperation with Edward S. Herman. So, Herman is like, let's see. So if I'm going to have an analog or something in parallel that's close to like something in cooperation, manufactured consent, Edward S. Herman, so you click on his name there, was an American economist, media scholar, and social critic. So he's like Engels, you know, Friedrich Engels to Karl Marx. And, you know, let's see, Chomsky is a darling of the left, of liberal ideology. Chomsky being a linguist and activist scholar who has written many other books, including Towards a New Cold War. I haven't read that one. But, you know, I know enough about manufactured consent, but I'm still gonna give you a little bit of an introduction here. The book introduced the propaganda model of communication, which is still developing today. The propaganda model of the manufacturer of public consent describes 5 editorial distorting filters, which are said to impact reporting of news in mass communications media. The 5 filters of editorial bias are the size, ownership, and profit orientation. The second one is the advertising license to do business. Sourcing mass media news, FLAC and enforces, and then to specify what FLAC and enforcers are, FLAC refers to negative responses to a media statement or program. So hit pieces, complaints, lawsuits, legislative actions. And fifth one is anti-communism, war on terror. Anti-communism, which included as a filter the original 1988 edition of the book, but Chomsky argues that since the end of the Cold War, anti-communism was replaced by the war of terror as the major social control mechanism. So then I'll put this into the shock doctrine, which I read the whole thing. I'm very happy about that, you know. And as I was introduced to Naomi Klein because of Adbusters and No Logo, you know. So this is where all this you know interweaves with each other into a fabric that is the history of propaganda, as best as I can tell you, you know, because I'm going to be on the internet forever giving these lectures, right? So whatever. Okay. So in the shock doctrine, Naomi Klein explodes the myth that the global free market triumphed democratically, and that's absolutely true. It's by coercion and extortion and racketeering and other dirty tactics. You know, more or less, you know, the way that a lot of this works is that if government wants to do something to you, they'll present a problem, a huge problem on a mass scale, and get everybody all riled up and getting into this mass psychosis, and then they control the communication and the ways of communication, and they close the pipeline of critical thoughts because you're in this state of basically, you know, being insane, in this heightened cortisol state, with adrenals and whatever else that the poor diets and interlinked interlinked. I'm not correlated to pharmaceutical usage or other drug usage. Again, the most common ones, as I've said before, are nicotine, caffeine, alcohol, marijuana. And then the fifth one that I'll add to that is the dopamine feedback loop from these devices right here. These phones that have been in our lives, these supercomputers that have been in our lives since about 2007. Okay, so so I'm gonna skip no, I'm not gonna skip that. So, new law at the most chaotic juncture in Iraq's civil war, a new law is unveiled that would allow Shell and BP to claim the country's vast oil reserves. Immediately following September 11th, the Bush administration quietly outsources the running of the war on terror to Halliburton and Blackwater. After a tsunami wipes out the coast of Southeast Asia, the pristine beaches are auctioned off to tourist resorts. New Orleans residents scattered from Hurricane Katrina discovered that their public housing, hospitals, and schools will never be reopened. So that's with the FEMA and stuff like that. And then I remember at the time that people were really, really riled up about FEMA camps and whatnot, and the conspiracy theorists were very concerned. And I'm not saying they're not concerned now, in 2023, with the number of disposable coffins that are stockpiled by FEMA, but that's taken out of proportion. Just because there's these coffins, that they have to be prepared for mass disasters, because you don't want corpses out in the open. That's how communicative diseases happen, and how bubonic plague was spread, and so on and so forth. Rotting corpses, they have parasites in them, and they have they're hazardous. That's why we send them to the morgue, and then off to the funeral home for them to be treated if they don't get incinerated and into ash. So that's like what's that video game? Dark, Death Stranding. Yeah, Death. Yeah, so like the corpses in Death Stranding are absolutely hazardous, and again, we're talking about 2023 here, so you know, it's a piece of art in itself, an absolute masterpiece. You know, it's very weird. You know, Kojima is known to be quirky, so all the credit to him. And there's a second one coming out right now, right meow, I think so. We're close to it. There's a second one coming up, and like the dead become monsters. Okay, so that's a good line. You know, the dead become monsters because they get manipulated into these figureheads for propaganda. Propaganda, blah, 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 blah. And when I'm dead and I'm still on the internet, this will happen to me too. People will use my example and so on and so forth for whatever reason that they want. They'll cut me up. They'll try to deep fake me or whatever it is, because that's the state of the world that we're in. They'll try to synthesize my voice. And they'll put an actor in front of a green screen and put a mask over their head, and then then they'll digitally impose my image onto whatever else, because that's how it is now. You don't even need to clone people. You just need good actors and good technology and a bit of AI. So you got to go back to the source, right? And that's why I'm citing manufacturer consent here and the shock doctrine, and like some of the first things that I was communicating with the okay, so body dressing, the Communist Manifesto. These are all important works because of it tells you, okay, so Communist Manifesto is more or less about seizing the means of power, and the means of power is production. And production in the modern age is controlled by artists. It's not controlled by anybody else, in cooperation with engineers who laid the foundation for this free and open society that's on the internet. Absolutely. I wouldn't be here without DARPA, and I wouldn't be here without MIT, and I wouldn't be here without Fanshawe College or Trent University, or Sault College, or CCH, or my primary schools. I wouldn't be here. I just wouldn't. Education matters. It absolutely matters. Okay, so back to Louis Wayne. And if you look at him, they're trying to, so in the plot, where is it? I was reading this article, I was watching the movie. Neuroscience Art Gallery. So these are a couple of the first results off of Google. And depending on your search history in your location, Google will send you different results for locality, and because of the algorithm that sends you what you want to see, so it becomes the hall of mirrors in a digital prison, or an echo chamber in this, which is another terminology. Outsider art. Where, I don't know what, I was on my phone here, but they're okay. So here it is. I think it is. Yeah, this is it. Okay, so the critics have been trying to argue that his work was emblematic or a good example of deteriorating mental conditions, and that he had something to do with his eyes, like Monet. As when you look at Monet, right? Claude Monet, and his artwork gets more and more foggier and less detailed through his life because I think he had glaucoma or something like that, and some or macular degeneration, aging, something along those lines. And I can see why they might think that, but from my short education with just armchair historian in this case, by just watching the movie, you can't get the whole story just by watching the movie. Again, you got to go back to the source material in order to get the real story, because it's firsthand information, which is the testimony, right? The secondhand information is the writing about the person, and then the third hand information is the writing about the writings, the critique of the initial texts, right? So again, you have first hand accounts, which are eyewitness, oh, I was there. Second hand is the writing about the event, and the third is which is usually a collection, or as I said, a critique or an analysis of the second hand and first hand information, like, together. Okay, So what happens to Wayne is that a lot of people in his life die within quick succession, within a number of years. Influenza in 1914. I think it's the Spanish influenza. H1N1 virus with genes of avian origin. The Spanish flu, correct. Okay, and then he was in a romantic relationship with Emily. Yeah, she gets diagnosed with breast cancer, and then he finds a cat. This is again just short asides from the movie. Scary stuff. Having been close to someone. And actually, my grandmother, she went through and had liver cancer. My French grandmother, she died very early in my life, so like around 91 or 92. And I don't remember much of her, unfortunately. And then, like, I think my grandfather, he died on my mother's side. He died around the same time from a weak heart, and he had to get a pacemaker. And the medical technology at the time, they didn't have laparoscopy. I'll look at the term here. Yeah, laparoscopy. They didn't have that. They'd have to break his chest open in order to get access to his heart. So it's a very invasive surgery at the time. Any kind of heart surgery, ugh, no thanks. I don't want to be a surgeon. I think I would rather be an aircraft mechanic and a surgeon of knowledge. Okay. So what really happens to Wayne is that after so many collective traumas with he and his family, and because his portrayal is that he's very naive and that he makes the mistake of not having any business sense, and well, not a mistake, just having a lacking of experience and familiarity with the rules of making money in that time without copywriting and so forth. So I'll loop back to what I was just saying earlier about how it's very important to, if you're an artist, to have digital copies of the originals right here, especially in this age now. It's very important with the original metadata that's associated with that file, and from what camera. Make sure that you back up those originals in case someone tries to steal your art, or just in case someone tries to attribute some credit or whatever. And it's the same case as it was in the early aughts with the advent of Napster, LimeWire, and then torrents through the Pirate Bay and digital downloading. It was a real problem for the music producers, but a lot of artists were just like, "You get what you deserve, Universal." Just stuff like that. Not to call them out, but that's the first name that I can think of. So sorry, Universal. Don't blame me. Okay. Yeah, and this is how propaganda can be used in different ways, because it's weaponized art, right? And Louis Wayne found a way to get his message of positivity through, and they say his life. They say his life is tragic, but he produced all of this stuff, and he was in a lot of cases more a model of mental health than anything else, because if you don't do anything with your life and all you do is the same maladaptive cycles, then you're falling into the trap of poverty, right? Of mental poverty. And that's the way that the governmental or the corporate propaganda works, is it preys upon the weak and those those without will or a strong spine. If you don't have a backbone, you don't have shoulders, you don't have good health, you don't have good diet, then you get taken advantage of. These are the building blocks of your entire life, because the body is a temple. We only have one, and you have to look after it. Okay. So the shock and awe, that's the gist of it. First there's as I was saying, first there's a problem, and then there's a solution. And then the politicians or the corporations can make themselves look like the saviors of humanity. But they're not the saviors of humanity. They're leeches in that case. And all they want is your money. And if I'm gonna give the example, corporate pharma, in this case, because it's most relevant, because we just went through COVID, and honestly, I'm talking about collective traumas or repetitions of these cortisol triggers and these adrenal triggers, because the mental health is correlated to physical health. Absolutely. The brain stem and the nervous system is an extension of the brain itself, right? Otherwise, nothing moves. Nothing happens, right? It's continuous signal from the thought all the way down to the fingertip, and vice versa. We as human beings, we exist as biomechanical machines. If you're going to go by religious terms, or connotations. This is the vessel that carries the soul, which is a big theme throughout history and arts. You know, what is the soul and whatnot? You know, what is consciousness? These great questions. What is it to be human? What is it to be alive? And what is it to exist? Okay. Yeah, I like this. Okay. It's been a while since I've read this stuff. The propaganda model of communication and its influence over major media organizations. So the propaganda model describes the major pillars of society: the public domain, business firms, media organizations, governments, etc., as I was just touching on. As first and foremost, profit seekers. To fully consider the effects of the propaganda model, a tiered diagram can be drawn. Due to the impressionable and exploitive nature of major media organizations, including broadcast media, print media, and 21st century social media, media organizations are placed at the bottom. As the model scales upward, it pans to larger organizations who are financially capable of controlling advertising licenses, lawsuits, or selling environments. So the very markets themselves. So, you know, we're in 5th generation warfare, which means, let's look this up here. So 5GW, interesting, 5G, right? If you want to know what 5G is, so 5 gigahertz, that's 8 UHF. Yeah, 5.114 to 585 gigahertz. Let's see, frequency bands. I don't know all of this stuff. This is more electronic engineering. So they teach you this in ground school, the radio frequencies, because, okay, short band radio and long band radio, and again, the frequency and vibration is the same as, this is how Tesla works, or Nikola Tesla worked in his idea that he could beam energy off of the ionosphere and have it be received somewhere else. So, okay, just go and look it up. Okay, so I'll look this up now. UHF, VHF. What is UHF and VHF? Very high frequency. UHF represents ultra high frequency. And UHF is also a Weird Al movie. So UHF is amateur radio, television, digital audio broadcasting. Excuse me. It's very important to be a human on camera, because it can't be replicated. AI doesn't fart, it doesn't burp, it doesn't show its teeth. There's more radio band frequencies. I encourage you to look it up for yourself there. And so everything has to do with vibrational frequency. You know, all matter, all physical matter is energy distilled to a very slow vibration and oscillations and so on and so forth. I'm not gonna get into too much detail because that's gonna go away from propaganda. But there is correlation in the hijacking of the biomechanical machines that we are, and the frequency for which and the wavelength that the brain works on, and so because of the firing of the synapses and also the beating of the heart. And since the blood is constituted by iron, right? You have to be very careful as to the iron content and to your hydration and so on and so forth, because without it, if you're dehydrated, then it puts you into a state, a stressful state. And when you're stressed, then it's easier to be suggested or to have a psychotic break, right? Stress leads to psychotic breaks. Let's be clear about that. And because there's physiological implications to all of this. Okay, so fifth generation warfare is warfare that is conducted primarily through non-kinetic military actions such as social engineering, misinformation, cyber attacks, along with emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence and fully autonomous systems. Here we go. This is interesting. Another Steele. The term fifth generation warfare was first used in 2003 by Robert Steele. We're a very smart family. In 2008, the term was used by Terry Tariff, who presented the 2003 Ricin letters as a potential example. So what are the Ricin letters? Okay, so the 2003 Ricin letters, they're used as weapons of terror. They were sent to the White House in October and November 2003, mailed to the White House. Yeah. Moving on, you know, and this is why I was saying earlier, you know, what was it? Unrestricted warfare. There we go. Fantastic, fantastic book. You learn from your enemy, respect them, because the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And if we're going to consider propaganda in this very moment in time, with say February 6th, 2023. Who is the enemy of the Chinese, of the Russian people? Right, continuing on. Who's the enemy of the United States? Who's the enemy of Canada? Who's the enemy of the Five Eyes countries? Europe, or the entire world? It's anybody who opposes the free and open society on the internet. Because internet is about communication. And AI, if you're going to ask me my opinion, is a false prophet. It will lead, and this is what a lot of other like science fiction teaches, is that if we allow AI to be given, you know, self-control and self-replication, it'll lead to our demise, and then we end up fighting machines, because the machine is created by people, and people put their unconscious biases into the products. And I know this very well as an artist, because everything I think goes into a brushstroke and through planning and you know, application, and the thickness, the concentration, and the emulsion, and you know, the very chemicals of the pigments themselves, all these thoughts you have to be taken into account when you're laying down the picture itself. So let me paint the picture for you. So Wayne, you know, okay, so he starts talking about the electricity and like through his, if we're going to go by the movie Electric Life, he starts seeing vibrancies, right? There's some sort of misinterpretation of the eyes to the brain, because the eyes is an extension of the brain. It's one of the first sensory organs that develops in the womb, and in monocellular or multicellular organisms is usually the eyes that develop first. Okay, so what did he do? What did his message, his weaponized art, accomplish? It changed the attitude of cats in Victorian society. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's right. Because keeping a cat in the Victorian era was unusual. They were strays, like dogs. Okay, what can I say? This is why it's very important when I talk about transgendered people or those who do self-harm, and why they're the most hard hit of propaganda. And the same with veterans or anyone else who's experienced a traumatic event, is because the short circuit, the pathway, is so burned out, right? There's scar tissue on the ends of the neurons, and it has to jump, and it's like MS. So there's mycelial layer around the nerves, right? And it has to jump, and then it burns through, and then it burns the neuron out. This is my guess, my theory. I know there's a lot of neuroscientists out there that can correct me if they want to. And because that happens, then it's going through the fat and it's burning out the fat that is the most of this, right? If someone calls you a fathead, that's actually a compliment. So like like when you chop off a limb, or you experience something very traumatic like surgery, and that's why it takes so long to recover, especially if it has to be done without anesthesia or some sort of battlefield procedure, and you're conscious for it, because you're in that heightened state. You imagine being that doctor that had to, remove his appendix in Antarctica. Like, holy crap, man. Holy crap. Okay, and basically, like, because so we'll go back to the market, controlling the market. This is what people do. This is what people who have money and that want artists to produce art. They want them to suffer, because they get onto this idea that an artist does their best work when they're suffering. And for some artists, it becomes a maladaptive coping mechanism, because they don't have any other outlets, and it becomes a manic obsession thing, and it's cyclical, and it's the only thing that's keeping them alive. And this is, so then they start producing stuff like this, and then after they die, as I was saying, it gets hijacked, and it becomes the meaning becomes entirely different than what it was in its day. And where else can I go with this? Okay, so I'll do a recap. Read the Shock Doctrine. Read as much as you can tolerate about manufacturing consent. And then Louis Wayne. And then also look up Fifth Generation Warfare. And I want you to look up something else. And that's emotions and temperature. So there's when you point an infrared gun or infrared camera at someone, you can see, because by distribution of the blood, what state of emotion the person's in, and so that's a predictor to a response, right? Either a trauma response or a positive response. And this is again, these are the means of manipulation, and then this is how the weaponized propaganda with the communication through this medium. Because so what's the medium is the message. Is a phrase coined by the Canadian communications theorist Marshall McLuhan in the first chapter in his Understanding Media, The Extension of Man, published in 1964. So having a one-sided conversation like I am with you right now, in the same way that broadcasters did with the advent of network television and the evening news, right? This is how people, because before that, with the technology, it was newspapers and artwork and so on and so forth. Because here we are, the history of propaganda. It's always the weaponized art always follows the technology. So as you know, so I'm gonna recap on this all over again. Louis Wayne, the shock doctrine, manufacturing consent, fifth generation warfare, emotions and temperatures, radio wavelengths, and the radio bands, and then the medium is the message. That's all.